The floor beneath my boots hummed softly, not in a threatening way, more like it was clearing its throat before speaking. I decided not to comment on that out loud. The last thing you want during a captain audition is to appear as the kind of person who argues with architecture. The corridor ahead stretched forward, bending slightly in a way that made my inner ear feel personally insulted. I followed the glowing line embedded in the floor because that's what the instructions said, and because glowing lines usually know what they're doing. Back on Earth, glowing lines were for nightclubs and emergency exits. Out here they decided your future. I reminded myself to breathe normally. This was just an audition, a routine process. Fill out forms, survive simulations, prove I wouldn't panic if gravity briefly decided to take a coffee break. Easy. I'd studied for years, logged thousands of flight hours, and memorized every regulation down to the footnotes no one respected. I was prepared. I was calm. I was absolutely not thinking about how the wall to my left briefly turned transparent and revealed a maintenance drone scuttling inside it like a mechanical insect with a university degree. The door at the end of the corridor irised open without drama, which I appreciated. Inside, the audition chamber waited, and I stepped in with what I hoped was confidence, and what was probably mild terror wearing a jacket. The room sealed itself behind me, the air shifting in pressure and temperature so subtly that I only noticed because my skin prickled like it had heard a rumor. A voice filled the space, smooth and genderless, polite in the way only artificial intelligence can be. "Candidate Jonah Hale," it said, "please stand at the center marker." I looked down. There was no marker. Then the floor lit up beneath my feet, a soft circle blooming into existence like it had been shy until now. I stepped fully into it. The circle adjusted, centering me with unsettling accuracy. I resisted the urge to shuffle. "Begin preliminary evaluation," the voice said. A panel slid open somewhere I couldn't see, and light poured in, scanning me from angles that suggested enthusiasm. I held still. I had nothing to hide except a small snack bar in my pocket, and if that disqualified me, I didn't want the job anyway. Data flickered across the air in front of me, symbols and graphs that meant everything to the system and nothing to my human eyes. "Neurological response within acceptable variance," the voice continued. "Cardiac rhythm stable, humor response detected." "Sorry," I said, "that might be a reflex." "Noted," the voice replied, and I could have sworn it sounded amused. The first simulation hit without warning. One moment I was standing in a quiet room, the next I was on the bridge of a ship that didn't exist, stars streaking past as alarms screamed like they were auditioning for a tragedy. I grinned despite myself. This was familiar territory. Controls rose from the floor, interfaces snapping into place around my hands as if they'd been waiting for me. I didn't think. I reacted. That was the trick. Thinking was for people who wanted to hesitate. An asteroid field erupted ahead, rocks tumbling in chaotic patterns that would have made a mathematician cry. I took manual control, weaving through gaps that existed for fractions of seconds, trusting instinct and experience. A warning flashed about shield integrity. I ignored it and rerouted power with a flick of my wrist. The ship shuddered, then steadied. "Show off," I muttered, not sure if I was talking to myself or the ship. The simulation shifted again. Now a distress signal, a freighter with failing life support, limited time, limited options. I made the call to save as many as possible, knowing full well that the numbers would never add up neatly. The simulation watched, silent and judging, as I prioritized, calculated, compromised. When it ended, the bridge dissolved into light, leaving me back in the chamber, breathing a little harder. "Decision-making parameters logged," the voice said. "Ethical deviation within acceptable thresholds." "I like to think of it as flexibility," I said. "Noted," the voice repeated. "Time blurred, tests stacked on tests. Psychological mazes, logic traps, scenarios designed to provoke fear, anger, overconfidence." I met them all with a stubborn mix of professionalism and sarcasm. When asked to define leadership, I said it was convincing people not to panic while you quietly panic on their behalf. When asked about loyalty, I said it depended on whether the ship deserved it. There was a pause after that one, long enough that I wondered if I'd crossed a line. Then everything stopped. No transition. No warning. The room went still, the ambient hum fading until the silence felt heavy enough to press against my ears. The glowing data vanished. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. I straightened instinctively, suddenly aware that something had changed. "Candidate Jonah Hale," the voice said, softer now, "remain where you are." "I wasn't planning on going anywhere," I said, "unless this is the part where the floor opens up." "Unlikely," the voice replied. "A priority communication has been received." Before I could ask from whom, the door opened again. This time, no corridor waited beyond it. Instead, there were two figures, tall and composed, wearing uniforms that marked them as something far above the evaluators I'd expected. Their eyes met mine briefly, assessing, and then one of them spoke. "You are to come with us." I blinked. Did I pass? "That information is not relevant," the figure said. "That's never a good sign," I muttered, but I followed them anyway. The glowing line reappeared, leading us in a direction I hadn't seen before. As we walked, I tried to catalog exits, weapons, escape routes. There were none that made sense. The ship or station, or whatever massive structure I was inside, seemed to rearrange itself subtly as we moved, corridors flowing like thoughts rather than architecture. "Can I ask what this is about?" I said. "You may," one of them replied. "Will you answer?" "No." "Fair enough." We stopped before another door, this one larger, its surface etched with symbols that shifted when I tried to focus on them. The guard stepped aside. The door opened, and a wave of stillness washed over me, deeper than silence, like the pause between heartbeats. Inside, she waited. For a moment, my brain refused to categorize what I was seeing, not because it was incomprehensible, but because it was unexpected. She looked human. That was the first disorienting truth. Not almost human, not vaguely human. Human in a way that hit some deep, instinctive recognition. Then the differences surfaced, subtle but undeniable. The long ears, elegant and unmistakable, sweeping back from her head. The way her presence seemed to bend attention toward her without effort, like gravity with opinions. I stopped a respectful distance away, because that felt like the safest choice. "You may leave us," she said, her voice calm, carrying authority without needing volume. The guards exited. The door sealed. I was alone with the alien queen, apparently, which was not on my audition checklist. She studied me in silence. I did my best not to fidget. I failed a little. "Is this the part where I bow?" I asked. "Because I can, but I should warn you I'm terrible at it." One corner of her mouth lifted, just slightly. "You may remain as you are." "Good," I said. I was worried I'd knock something over. "Jonah Hale," she said, tasting the name like it mattered. "You were not meant to reach this stage." "That's comforting," I replied. "I always like to feel unexpected." Her gaze sharpened, curious now. "You treat this lightly." "I cope with stress through inappropriate humor," I said. "My instructors called it a flaw. My friends called it survival." "Perhaps," she said, "you were selected for reasons beyond your technical aptitude." "Let me guess," I said. "Ancient prophecy, hidden bloodline, mistaken identity involving someone much taller." She regarded me for a long moment. "No," she said. "Compatibility." That word settled between us, heavy and unfinished. "I think we might be defining that differently," I said carefully. She rose and approached, and I became acutely aware of the space between us shrinking, of my heart deciding to increase its workload without consulting me. "Your audition," she said, "was never routine. You were observed long before you arrived here." "That feels like something I should have signed a waiver for," I said. "Your reactions," she continued, "your choices under pressure, your humor in the face of uncertainty. These are not incidental traits." "I've been told my mouth gets me into trouble," I said. "And out of it," she replied. She stopped an arm's length away. Up close, the differences were clearer, woven into the familiar rather than replacing it. The long ears were not ornamental. They moved slightly, responsive, alive with attention. "There is a ship," she said, "and a system bound to it. It cannot be commanded by just anyone." I swallowed. "You're saying this wasn't about becoming a captain?" "It was," she said, "but not in the way you understand." I exhaled slowly, then smiled despite myself. "You know," I said, "every time my life starts to make sense, something like this happens." Her eyes softened. "Then you are precisely where you should be." She did not invite me to sit. That felt intentional. I stayed where I was, hands loosely at my sides, posture neutral in the way people learn when standing before someone who could, theoretically, end civilizations before breakfast. I reminded myself that panicking would not help, and that fainting would be embarrassing in a room this quiet. "You are wondering why you are here," she said. "I have a list," I replied. "That's item number 1. Item number 2 is whether this room has cameras, because I feel like I'm in a very expensive prank." "There are no cameras," she said. "That's somehow worse." She turned away from me and began to walk, not toward anything in particular, just moving as if the space responded to her presence. I followed, because standing still while the alien queen paced felt like a bad tactical choice. The floor adjusted under our steps, subtle shifts that suggested the room was listening. "You believe this was a captain's audition," she said. "For you it was. For everyone else?" I asked. "For everyone else it was exactly what it appeared to be." "That's comforting," I said, "so I'm special." "You are suitable," she corrected. "I think that's what my last performance review said." She stopped, I stopped. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt less like judgment and more like anticipation. "There is a vessel," she said, "not yet commissioned, not yet named. It contains an interface that responds to cognition rather than command." "Great," I said. "So if I think the wrong thing, does it explode?" "No," she said, "it sulks." I blinked. "I'm sorry, did you just say the ship sulks?" "Yes." That might be the most relatable thing I've heard all day. Her gaze flicked to me, sharp and assessing, and then, unexpectedly, amused. "You do not react as others have." "I've found screaming internally saves time," I said. She resumed walking. As we moved, the room seemed to unfold, not revealing walls or objects but information. Symbols drifted into the air, slow and deliberate, forming patterns that made my head ache in the way deep puzzles do. "The interface was designed during a convergence," she said. "Multiple species, one purpose. It required a mind that could adapt, improvise, and accept contradiction." "That sounds like a terrible committee," I said. "It was," she replied. "Many died." "Okay," I said, tone shift noted. She gestured, and one of the symbols expanded, resolving into a shifting field of light. I felt it brush against my thoughts, not invasive, but curious, like someone leaning over your shoulder to read without permission. "Hey," I said, "at least buy me dinner first." The field recoiled slightly. "It reacts to intent," she said, "and to humor." "You're telling me sarcasm is a universal language," I said. I knew it. The field shifted again, settling as if appeased. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, a sense of being measured in ways no test had ever managed. "You were not meant to reach this chamber," she said again. "Your probability curve diverged." "Story of my life," I said. She turned fully toward me now. "If you accept what is being offered, your life will no longer follow familiar patterns." "I feel like that ship sailed when the audition hallway started whispering," I said. "This is not an offer made lightly," she said, "nor one that can be rescinded. That feels like something you should lead with." She studied me, long enough that I became uncomfortably aware of every bad decision I'd ever made. Then she spoke again, quieter. "There is a threat moving through known space." There it was, the reason. I felt it settle in my chest, heavy and inevitable. "Let me guess," I said. "Not pirates, not war, something worse." "It does not attack," she said. "It overwrites." "Of course it does. Systems fail not because they are destroyed," she continued, but because they become something else. I tried to picture that and failed, so you can't shoot it. No. You can't negotiate. No. You can't reason with it. No. I exhaled. Okay, I'm officially concerned. She nodded once. The vessel was designed to move ahead of it, to map, to adapt, to find weaknesses where none are apparent. And it needs someone like me, I said. It needs someone who will argue with it, she said, and then listen. I laughed despite myself. You're describing a very specific personality flaw. Yes, she said, we selected for it. The field of light pulsed again, closer this time. I felt a pull, not physical but mental, like a door left ajar in my thoughts. Is this the part where I say yes? I asked. No, she said. This is the part where you understand the cost. The symbols shifted, and suddenly I was seeing fragments. Not images, not memories, but impressions. Isolation. Long stretches of uncertainty. Decisions that could not be undone. And threaded through it all, a constant presence, not mine, not hers, but something vast and patient. You would not command alone, she said. I swallowed. You're coming with me. Yes, that's unexpected. She inclined her head. The interface requires balance. Of course it does. There was a pause, and in it, something unspoken settled between us. Not destiny, not romance. Something quieter and more dangerous, mutual dependence. You're very calm about this, she said. I'm not, I replied. I'm just good at pretending. That will not be sufficient, she said. Then I'll adapt, I said. You did say that was a requirement. For the first time, she smiled openly. And in that moment, the pressure in the room eased, just a little, as if the universe itself had decided to wait and see what I would do next. I said yes before I finished understanding what yes meant. The word left my mouth lightly, almost casually, the way you agree to help someone move furniture without asking how many floors are involved. The room did not react immediately, which made it worse. Very well, she said at last. That's it, I asked. No ominous chanting, no glowing marks appearing on my skin. Those come later, she said. I snorted. Of course they do. The room shifted, not visually but conceptually, like a thought resolving itself. The pressure I hadn't realized I was holding against eased, and in its place came motion. Not physical motion, but purpose. I had the unsettling sense that something very old had just checked my name off a list. You will not be given time to reconsider, she said as we walked. That is not cruelty, it is mercy. I appreciate efficient mercy, I said, very modern. The path ahead unfolded without doors. I stopped trying to understand how. At some point, you either adapt or you develop a headache. I chose adaptation. You're awfully calm, I said after a while. You mistake calm for acceptance, she replied. Fair. We entered the ship without ceremony. I knew it was the ship because everything in me reacted at once. A strange alignment, like my thoughts had snapped into a groove they'd been circling all my life. The interface was there, waiting, not as a thing but as a presence. Oh, I said softly, you're awake. The response came not in words but in a feeling, curiosity, suspicion, and something like irritation. I get that a lot, I said. I'm working on it. The presence leaned in, metaphorically speaking. I felt my memories brush against it, my instincts, my worst jokes. It paused at those, confused. Yes, I said. That's staying. She stood beside me, close enough that I could sense her attention shifting between me and the ship. It is assessing you. I'd prefer a performance review, I said. The ship pulsed. Not approval, not rejection, engagement. That's progress, she said. The first jump was unpleasant. I will not sugarcoat it. Space did something impolite to causality, and my stomach filed a formal complaint. I laughed through it, because if you don't laugh, you scream, and screaming doesn't help anyone. We moved ahead of the threat. Not faster in the traditional sense, but sideways. The universe peeled back layers I hadn't known existed. Laws bent. Some snapped. The ship adjusted, sulking briefly when I questioned it too sharply, then responding when I apologized. Yes, I know, I muttered. I could have phrased that better. She watched all of this with careful interest. You are learning. So are you, I said. The threat revealed itself slowly. Not a monster, not an enemy fleet, a pattern, a rewrite. Entire regions of space becoming something else, familiar constants replaced with alien logic. Well, I said, that's rude. The ship resonated agreement. We tested. We failed. We adapted. I stopped pretending to be fearless and started being honest. When I didn't know, I said so. When I was afraid, I joked, then admitted the fear underneath. The ship responded better to that. So did she. At some point, without noticing when, I stopped thinking of myself as auditioning. I was the captain, not because I'd been chosen, but because I'd chosen back. The solution didn't come as a grand revelation. It came as a compromise. A way to introduce contradiction into the rewrite. Humor, the ship suggested in its own abstract way. Variance. Refusal to resolve cleanly. You're telling me, I said slowly, that we confuse it. Yes, she said. I grinned. I was born for this. We seeded pockets of stubborn reality, pockets that refused to become something else. Not through force, but through insistence. The threat slowed, then fractured, then lost coherence entirely. Silence returned. Real silence this time. I slumped back, exhausted, exhilarated. So, I said, did we just save the galaxy? For now, she said, I'll take it. The ship settled, content, no longer sulking, almost pleased. We returned not as heroes, but as something quieter, proof. The fleet adjusted its protocols. The Queen's people watched me differently now, not with awe, but with recognition. You have changed, she said later. I hope so, I replied. Otherwise this was a very stressful waste of time. She smiled, and this time there was no tension behind it, just understanding. I thought back to the man who'd walked into an audition trying not to spill coffee. He felt distant now, not gone, just expanded. Same humor, I added. That, she said, was never in question. The future opened ahead of us, uncertain and imperfect and very much alive. I squared my shoulders, met it head-on, and cracked one last joke. Because some things are worth keeping, no matter how far you travel.